All right. Hi, guys. Welcome. I am so excited for this week. So I have Katie. Again, she's another fellow person that I met over social media. One of the reasons I love social media because it really can be like such an amazing, useful, resourceful tool, and you can find people in it. I truly love these. So I actually stumbled across her from when I was on the podcast with Open Adoption Project. They posted one of her quotes on their story, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. And then I started following her, and she's just amazing and wonderful. And I'm so excited to hear from her and her story and everything that she does. I've gotten to know her a little bit, and so it's gonna be super duper awesome. But really quick, this spoke to my heart. I want to read this to you. This is something that Katie shared on her Instagram about adoption because y'all know I love it so much. And I know there's different parameters and everybody feels different about it, but this is beautiful. She put on here, once we truly understand adoption, we know it's not about saving, but rather supporting. And it's 100% true. And I just absolutely loved it. And so I am going to go ahead and turn the time over to Katie and just let her take it away and talk about her.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Katie, and I am really passionate about adoption because it's always been a part of my story. Because when I was 2 days old, I was adopted. So I'm an adoptee, and I'm also a birth mom. I placed my son when he was 6 months old with my parents through kinship adoption. And then I have a daughter that I placed in 2010 through an agency that I just immediately knew from the time that I was pregnant that I wanted to start on that particular journey. And I would just say, like, part of what led me to being a birth mom, I grew up with a lot of identity issues. I think, now that I'm an adult, I realize that a lot of it is tied to being adopted and growing up in a closed adoption. So I didn't know a lot of my story. And I think that that really just was something that I didn't understand until adulthood, but I knew something was missing growing up. And so while I was trying to figure that out, what was missing, I really just struggled with my worth. And that kind of led me to this, super boy crazy phase as a teenager. And it really wasn't a surprise to me that I ended up pregnant by 18 and, being adopted immediately. So it's a super overwhelming time period to find out that you're pregnant, especially at so young. So my first immediate reaction was, oh my gosh, my parents are going to kill me. And that was probably all that I was worried about at that time, is like how my parents were going to react. And after the initial reactive moments, my mom was just like, you're adopted. This is at least something that you should look into. And so I did. And I went and sat down with an agency and talked about it. But at that time, I just really, first of all, I was really stubborn because I was a typical teenager and pretty much want to do everything opposite of what people tell you to do or trying to guide you. And you're like, you don't know anything. Turns out they do. They know a lot. But I quickly was like, okay, let me sit down with these people. And I heard them out and I really did think about it. But at the end of the day, I just really thought that I could do it. Teenage pregnancy was so glamorized growing up with, 16 and pregnant and all the teen parenting shows that were on MTV and such. And so I thought, if they can do it, I can do it. And 6 months into it, I realized, wow, I don't even know how to take care of myself. And this really just isn't fair. Because, as any mother would know, as soon as I held my son for the first time, I had never known love as when I looked at him. And I would have done anything for him, still to this day, would do that. And I just knew that this was not the road that I wanted him to go down. I could have done it. There are resources out there that can help women in those situations. They're not very plentiful, and people don't really present them to you, especially in that moment of need when you're considering your options. But it would not have looked like his life has looked like now. And I think that part of me would have really regretted that and been sad for him that he wouldn't have had the opportunities that he's had, being able to be raised by my parents. So I have an extremely open adoption with him. I see him daily, and he knows that I'm his birth mom, and he has a really amazing relationship with me. He gets to see, how much I love him through our intentional relationship every day. And then a couple years later, I settled down a little bit, but I was still just really lost. I was hurting a lot too from placing my son, and didn't really know how to process that. And just was going back to those unhealthy coping skills with fleeting relationships, and looking for my worth in other people's opinion of me. And I ended up pregnant again. And I literally went to an adoption agency the day that I found out I was pregnant, and sat down with them and said, this is what I'm doing. I know 100% that this is the path that I want to take. I've been here before, and I cannot do it the way that I did it before. Um, and again, like, as much as I wanted to keep her, I just knew that I wasn't at a place in life where I could give her the life that I dreamed for her. And the main priority when I was talking with the agency was that I was going to have an open adoption, because while I didn't feel like I could give her everything that I dreamed for her at that point, I did not want to walk away from her either. And so I made that very clear that I wanted to continue to have an intentional relationship with her as well, because I see how fruitful that is with my son. And so I wanted to carry that through with my daughter as well. And so I ended up living in the dorm that the agency offered, which was really great because I was around other women who were going through the same situation. And it was just a time for me to really reflect on what I was doing. I really, really thought my decision through. It was surprising to me because since I grew up in an adoption world, knowing so much about adoption and the beauty of adoption, um, I remember the first time that someone in the dorm chose to parent, and they ended up leaving the dorm because, they were going home to parent. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, I can do that. We can do that. We can change our mind. And it was just such an empowering moment for me, but also like really helped me break through that adoptee mindset that I had always grown up in, of like this whole, when you're an adoptee, you only really hear the positive things because you're seeing the end result, especially in closed adoption. You're only seeing that beautiful completion of family. And so that's all that I had was, rainbows and sunshine. Adoption is beautiful. I never realized until I was in the depths of my grief that my birth mother lost a whole lot when she decided to place me for adoption. And, you know, when I saw that woman decide that this wasn't the path she was going to take, it really just gave me that reminder that this is my choice. And I don't have to be rash. I can sit here and I can take my time, and nothing is said and done until I sign those relinquishment papers. And in Texas, where I placed, that can be signed 48 hours and on after birth. So, really, I just spent the whole time really thinking about it. I prayed about it, just talked with friends, talked with family. And at the end of the time, when I was ready to have her, when I was in labor, I just had peace about it. I knew that this was the decision that I wanted to make still. And I was thankful that I had so much of an awakened awareness through that moment of getting to see other women walk that path with me and choose different paths at the end. But I think it just made me really appreciate my voice so much more. And so I went forward with placement and got to know my daughter's parents pretty well during that season. It was important to me to have a relationship with them, have a blossoming friendship so that I could kind of find out what their what their morals are, what their ideas are on parenting, what is her life going to look like after I place her. Just the little things. I asked everything that I possibly was curious about, and they were just so gracious with me, and we started this really organic friendship from the beginning. And they would invite me to go do stuff with them on weekends. They would drive down to Fort Worth, where I am, and spend time with me. And it was just really great to establish that bond before my daughter was ever a part of the picture. Because I think with like why that was so important to me is because a lot of birth moms, when we're um, when we're an expectant mother considering adoption, we think that everybody that is interacting with us is just interested in the baby and that it is not about us. And when someone is intentional with you and takes that time to pour into you as well, and show you that it's not transactional, like this is love, this can be a family, this can be great. um, that's really special, and I'm so blessed that that's my situation with my daughter's parents, because it is not what open adoption looks like for everyone. And in fact, honestly, my story is the rarity. But being able to get to know them, and when I had actually gone into labor, they came up there the day after I had her and got to see her for the first time. And, fast forward to now she's 11, we just have a super great relationship. I can just text them any day and say, "Hey, are y'all free this weekend? I'd love to go to the zoo," or whatever that looks like. And they're very open to those kind of things. And getting to watch her interact with my son, because they both know that they're siblings, that's been a whole nother layer to fill my mom cup. Just to watch them interact together and to kind of see it play out as it could have. It could have been that they would have grown up together, and to be able to see that in little moments just is really sweet, because they adore each other and they love spending time together. And it's just it's just really good. I mean, our open adoption plan has just been really amazing. But again, I don't the fact that it's so rare is not lost upon me. And it is really hard for me to hear that a lot of birth moms don't have the same situation with their kids or the adopted parents.
No, that's wonderful. That's awesome. I feel like for me at least the parameters are starting to change because mine was a closed adoption. So I'm like you where I grew up where, like you don't have any of that. But I feel like people who are adopting these days, they try everything to keep it open if they can. I know with me it's a little different because I'm an international adoptee too. So it's kind
Mhm.
of harder that way. But I think that's awesome. And I think that's amazing. And I love how you brought up because I really think a lot of adoptees can sympathize and relate with that is like you 100% see the beautiful side of it. Like this is the outcome, this is what happens, this and this and this, but then there's all these other factors that unless you're an adoptee, you don't realize that you're missing or you don't understand. And so I love how you pointed that out. I have not had anybody ever point that out before, and because it's so true. It's 100% true. Um, so like there was a question I wanted to ask. So did you knew obviously that you were adopted, correct? Because the first time you got pregnant and then your mom says, well, you're adopted. Were your parents like fairly open with you when you were younger and stuff that you were adopted?
Yes, they've always been totally transparent about the fact that I was adopted, and I have a sister as well that they adopted 3 years after me. And both her and I, we've talked about it. We never remember mom and dad sitting us down and like having some big revelation conversation. They just always told us throughout the years that eventually we were like, well, this is just who I am. And in fact, when I was young, that was I always knew on the first day of school when they would ask, what's a fun fact about you? I was like, I got this. And the introvert in me was always so proud because I was like, I don't have to think of anything else. I'm adopted and that's fantastic. And I would always be like, I have two families that love me so much, and just had that huge sense of pride. So again, like from a very young age, it was kind of instilled in me that adoption is beautiful, adoption is love. And while it is those things, I didn't understand until I had gone through it myself. I started to understand a little bit, but then after I placed my daughter, I ended up finding my biological family. And I met my biological mom um, when I was 21. And I remember a moment where literally she just couldn't stop crying when she first saw me. She just kept telling me how beautiful I was, and then she just kept crying. And she said that she thought that I would never come looking. And even my grandmother said that too. She was like, when you turned 18, we were a little hopeful, but then as the years passed, we just started to think you were never going to come look. But seeing my birth mom, physically go through that grief in front of me and just completely fall apart, I understood her. I knew exactly how she felt, and I knew exactly how hard that had to have been for her. And, because we've modernized adoption so much and we've started to listen to birth mothers' stories and their voices and adoptee voices, we're learning, we're changing the pattern of adoption, we're creating a more ethical experience, we're making sure that there's support where is needed, where it hasn't always been before. I'm fortunate that I've had outlets of support as a birth mom. My birth mother never had that. She never even sat with someone who understood her grief until she met me. And so for her to unpack not only meeting her child for the first time since she was a baby, but then to also sit with another birth mom who understood her pain, like, it's just crazy that she had to go so many years without someone understanding her and seeing her for her hurt and her loss.
No, that's beautiful. And that's been my favorite thing about this is like listening to all walks of life with adoption, but especially adoptees, obviously, because I'm an adoptee. It's really good. And it's just how you pointed out today. You pointed out something that I've never really even like I've had my own thoughts about, but like, adoption is beautiful and amazing, but then you've also got to take the heartache with it too. And like I learn something every single time I do one of these, and I love it. And I love that I can, you relate and you find this, I mean, we barely met each other, but since we have this a connection with adoption. I mean, even if you were just a birth mom, it's the same kind of thing. It's crazy how it all just intertwines and everybody is connected. And I think that's beautiful. And I love that you got to have that experience with her. Are you still in contact with your birth mom?
So we have kind of an estranged relationship. She unfortunately is an addict. And so when I met her, she was not in a great place at life. And she has gotten even worse since, the decade that I have known my biological family. And I think a lot of that, like a lot of why I'm so mindful of her grief is because I have done a lot of searching of wondering if she would have had support. Like, would she still have been the woman that I met when I finally found her? Would she have had a more successful path to where she didn't feel like she needed to do these things that are so destructive in her life? And I mean, we'll never know, right? You can do the what if game forever, but it does really make me aware of the grief that we as birth mothers go through, because if you don't have support, then your life can look similar to what my birth mom's does. And I mean, sure, a lot of that is her own decisions and it's not all tied to the trauma of her adoption, but I think that some of it does tie to it. Like, she was looking for a way to numb that pain, and it was really difficult for her to choose to place me.
No, and it's crazy to hear like the ones that have like other adoptees. I just like to hear the outcome with their relationship when they've had their birth family. That's hard. I mean, that's hard to watch because you sympathize and all those things and stuff. But I also love that you still have people in your corner and that are still there for you and stuff. So what
Yeah.
I want to move on to is share what you guys do, what you were talking to me about earlier.
Sure. So, because I've had so much experience in the adoption world, it's so intertwined into who I am. Um, And because of what I just told you about, of how I'm so aware of birth parents needing support, even still today, there are plenty of outlets out there, but even still, there's not enough. And I wouldn't say it's readily available. And even more so, it's usually tied to an agency or an organization where that adoption took place. And often that's the root of the hurt. So even though they're offering resources, it's pretty common for women and men to be like, well, yeah, you're associated with my pain. And even though you offer that, that's great, but I don't want anything to do with you. I'd rather just walk on and, figure it out by myself. And so one of my friends and I, we met at a birth mom support group. We placed through the same agency. And we just started to realize that that was the common story, that a lot of birth parents were not taking up the resources that were available to them. And we just really wanted to reframe that and figure out how we could change it to be more appealing, of a resource, so that we could help other people find the healing and the coping skills that we have learned over the years to reach a place of healing. Um, and so we created an organization called The Table DFW, and we exist just to connect birth parents to one another. We have a support group every third Thursday of the month on Zoom, um, and that's at 7 p.m. Central Time. And it's not even therapeutic. I know a lot of times when people hear support group, they're like, oh, great, that sounds awful. I don't want to do that. But it really is just like what you and I are doing right now. We hop on Zoom. We have friends, even all the way up in Canada, that come and join us. And we talk about what's going on in our stories at that time, whether it be, I'm having a hard time connecting with the APs, or I'm really struggling with grief because it was my daughter's birthday yesterday. We're able to have these conversations in a complete casual setting with no pressure and no one telling us how we should be feeling, but rather people validating you by saying, hey, I feel that way too sometimes. And this is what I've learned through those moments. Or even if they don't have something to say, they can say, I hear you and I'm here for you. And that has made all the difference in our support groups. We've just seen so many people become friends, and we are just really enjoying living life together with other birth moms. And then we also have in-person events about every other month. So people who are local to the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, they can come and enjoy a happy hour. We did live music last month. It's just a really, again, casual setting for people to connect with one another. And the main goal that we really wanted was just for people to find a network of friends. It is so much easier to walk through grief when you're doing it with other people. It never gets easier as a birth mom, because my grief is always the same, and there are things every day that trigger me. Even a question as simple as how many kids do you have will send me quickly into, one, do I answer this person honestly and have to expose all my vulnerable secrets? Or two, do I just say I don't have kids and then feel shame inside because I do? So like even the simple conversation starters can be a trigger, and to be able to just unpack that with someone else and know that you're not the only one that feels that way is super rewarding.
Oh, I think that's beautiful. And I will tag you and I'll ask you for more info on that so I can get people, if they want, to get in touch with you, because I've talked to some fellow birth moms. And I think that's absolutely wonderful and amazing. And I feel like just not only with birth moms, but you can do that for any walk of life. If you like have anything that you're going through, and I think that's amazing. And Zoom has made it so easy to connect with people now. I mean, that's, I guess, I know some people have a love-hate with Zoom with all this weirdness in the world, but like it really is. It's been one of my favorite things because like you can sit down and have a good conversation with people. So that's amazing. Do you have anything else that you want to share?
I would just say that my biggest piece of advice as an adoptee to other adult adoptees, or even young adult adoptees, I've gone through a lot of disappointment in my story. I mean, I shared with you that my birth mom is an addict, and when I was searching for my birth father, I found out even worse information about him. So I have faced just a plethora of disappointment in finding out all of these things when I was discovering my biological roots. And I get asked often, well, do you regret it? Because, we adoptees have always heard it. When people hear that you're going searching, you always get the unsolicited advice of, well, what if it goes really bad? Okay, well, mine did. Mine did go pretty bad. But I wouldn't change it for anything because I have an amazing relationship with family members who, have benefited from me finding them, like my grandparents. And I even got to know my great grandmother for a little while. And then I found out I had half siblings and I have cousins. And there's just so much beautiful relationships that I have established because I had the courage to go look. And while it was hard and I'm still having to process a lot of things, I would never go back and do it differently because just knowing that piece of me has given me so much validation in my identity and closure of just knowing that this is simply like my grandparents and I share the same chin, or I had red hair when I was little. Well, my uncle has red hair. So just like simple things like that, or even my love of music. Well, I think I got that from my grandmother. And so just getting to know them and learn more about me and know that they never stopped thinking about me through the years, that made it all worth it. It was hard, so hard, and it still is hard for me because sometimes I just wish that I had that beautiful storybook reunion and met someone who was, um, in a great path of life, but that wasn't my story, and I can still take things away from that.
I love that. I absolutely love that because I mean it is. That was probably one of the scariest things when I decided to, and I waited till I was like 30 to search out my my biological family. So I mean, it's something that I feel like for a lot of adoptees, it's scary, it's confusing, it's weird, and it's like you have to choose the right time to do it yourself. But I love it. And even I feel like even people that do have supposed fairy tale endings with their biological family, there's still a lot of crap that people don't know that goes down. Like there's still a lot of things that you're like, even though it looks all nice and fluffy, there's things that you like as you learn, at least for me, as I've gotten to know my bio family more, it's like, oh, okay, okay, okay. Like you know what I mean? But I mean, they're human, so I get it. But there's just different parameters to it. So I absolutely love that. One last question that I want to ask you, how are your parents? Were they super supportive with you wanting to find your birth family?
Unfortunately, I want to say yes, and I truly believe that they gave their best effort. Um, it's super terrifying for a parent to let go of the control and let your child go find their identity in this other family that they've known about, but it was never like that tangible because they didn't have a relationship with them. And I remember when I went to go drive to see my grandparents and the family members that had come over to the house to meet me, I said that I was going to be gone for half a day. My sister happened to be in town and was with my mom that day. And I let her know at lunch that I was going to go meet my great grandmother. And so I was going to stay the second half of the day so that I could go see her. Later on, I find out that my sister said that my mom cried and cried and that she had a really hard time coping with the fact that I, was staying longer and getting closer to them. And at first, I really had a hard time coping with that myself because I was like, I can't believe she wouldn't be supportive. I don't get it. And my sister was just, gentle and reminded me that it's hard for her too. Like she had to let you go meet strangers and hope that it went okay. And, there's all these feelings as a mother of hoping the best for your child. And this is like it's a huge moment for them. And for her to have no control of that, I think that that was just really hard for her. And she had to grieve some of that, letting go as a mom to let me grow up and go find out some of my truth. But at the end of the day, they've through the last decade, they have had a relationship with my grandparents too, and they've met my birth mother, and they've just seen who they are, and they know that they're my family now too, and they are very supportive of all of that. But I will say, like, no matter how supportive you are as an adoptive parent, especially when your child is going to search their biological roots after a closed adoption, it's just hard for them too.
You nailed it on the head 100%. Cause yeah, there's so many feelings that go, like, we could talk for hours about it, on play on every single part of it. Birth moms, adoptees, adoptive parents. There's so many emotions that go into something like trying to find biological family. So no, that's great. That's amazing. And seriously, thank you so much for taking some time out of your night. I know it was, I don't know, is it your husband or your boyfriend's birthday today? Like,
Boyfriend.
thank you. Thank you for doing that, and tell him thank you. I know you said he was celebrated, but seriously, I appreciate it. So I will tag you. Do you have like an Instagram or anything for the table that you guys offer? Do you have anything like that?
Yes,
Okay,
it's
perfect.
I'll email you the
Awesome.
link.
Yeah, do that and I'll get that info. So then when I post this, I can tag you, and then anybody that wants to go her way. Seriously though, thank you so much, Katie, for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. And I've enjoyed getting to know you, and I'm going to enjoy continuing to follow you and all your amazing quotes that you're going to post. And thank you. Thank you for sitting down and letting me learn some more with you. And I just truly, truly appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I've really enjoyed getting to know you too.